I came face to face with a man hiding in my basement. And the worst part is, he knew my house better than I did. This happened around 10 months after I moved into my very first house. At the time, I was 25 years old. I had recently finished college, landed a steady job, and finally felt like my life was settling into something stable. I lived alone, paid my own bills, and, for the first time, I was not constantly worried about what came next. The house itself was small and unremarkable, tucked into a quiet residential area. Nothing about it stood out at first glance. Nothing except the basement. It was far larger than it should have been for a house that size. I rarely went down there. Mostly it was used for storage. Old boxes, unused furniture, and the washer and dryer. That was it. The previous owners had divided the basement using thin plywood walls and exposed wooden framing. At the bottom of the stairs was an open main area. Beyond that was the laundry section. Farther back was a makeshift workshop. And at the very end was a strange storage room filled with random junk. The layout made the basement feel like a maze. You could not see the entire space from any one spot. When I toured the house before buying it, I actually thought that was interesting. Looking back now, that thought makes my stomach turn. One night during the week, after getting home from work, I realized I needed to do laundry. That was basically the only reason I ever went into the basement. I grabbed my basket and headed for the door. Before I even stepped onto the stairs, I noticed something odd. The basement lights were already on. It caught my attention, but not enough to alarm me. I had been down there a few days earlier, so I assumed I had simply forgotten to turn them off. The lighting in the basement was always poor. I never replaced the old yellow bulbs that came with the house. Even fully lit, the space felt dim and heavy, like the light never quite reached the corners. I started walking down the stairs. Everything escalated so suddenly that my mind could not keep up. I reached the bottom step and took a few steps toward the laundry area when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. It was subtle, but enough to make my chest tighten. I turned my head instinctively. That is when I saw him. A man was crouched behind a folding table near the far corner of the basement. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I nearly dropped the laundry basket. There was a complete stranger hiding in my basement. We locked eyes. I could not move. I could not speak. His stare was empty and unsettling. His clothes were filthy. His hair was matted. He looked like someone who had been living somewhere dark and damp for a long time. Then, without saying a word, he stood up and ran. Not toward me. He ran deeper into the basement, disappearing into the maze of plywood rooms in the back. That snapped me out of it. I started backing away toward the stairs, trying to stay quiet, trying not to panic. But I hesitated for too long. Before I could reach the first step, every single light in the basement shut off at once. Until that moment, I had never experienced that basement in total darkness. I was not prepared for how complete it was. There were no shapes, no shadows, nothing at all, just black. I assumed I knew my own house well enough to find the stairs. That assumption was wrong. I misjudged my footing and tripped, slamming into the floor. When I got back up, I had no idea which direction I was facing. Fear and adrenaline overwhelmed my thoughts. My phone was upstairs on the kitchen counter. I could not turn on a flashlight. I could not call for help. In pure desperation, I started screaming. I screamed as loud as I could, hoping it would scare him away. Instead, I heard screaming coming from the other side of the basement. His voice was deeper, louder, filled with something wild and unhinged. We screamed at each other in the dark. Then I stopped. And so did he. I began moving forward slowly, feeling my way along walls and furniture. I had no other choice. Then I heard footsteps behind me. He was moving too. The sounds were getting closer, and a terrifying realization hit me. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, better than I did, like he had been down there many times before. The basement felt endless. I could hear his breathing now, close enough that I was sure he was about to grab me. After what felt like forever, my hand brushed against the wooden base of the staircase. I grabbed the railing and ran upward. I did not even make it to the second step. Something seized my ankle and yanked me backward. I lost my grip, smashed my head against the railing, and fell hard onto the basement floor. I could not see him, but I felt him dragging me away from the stairs with terrifying strength. I kicked, I thrashed, I fought with everything I had. Somehow, one of my kicks connected. His grip loosened just enough for me to twist free. I ran again, blindly, toward the stairs. He screamed behind me, but I reached them first. I burst out of the basement and slammed the door shut behind me. There was no lock. I threw my body against the door just as footsteps thundered up the stairs. A massive impact slammed into it, forcing it open for a split second. I shoved it closed with everything I had. He kept hitting it, over and over again. I pulled my socks off so my feet would not slip and braced myself, knowing that if he got through, it was over. Eventually, the impacts stopped. I heard footsteps retreating down the stairs. I ran for my phone, grabbed it, and pressed myself back against the door while calling the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. One of the small basement windows had been forced open from the outside. Nothing was stolen. That was the worst part. One of the officers suggested the man may have been using the basement as a place to hide, possibly even living there. That thought unsettled me more than the attack itself, because it meant he had been watching me, learning my habits, waiting. They also pointed out something else. The light switch was hidden behind one of the plywood walls. It was not obvious. I struggled to find it when I first moved in, but he knew exactly where it was. That night, I did not sleep. I sat on my bed with every light on, listening to every sound the house made. I stayed there for a few more months, but I never felt safe again. Every time I passed the basement door, my chest tightened. Sometimes I thought I heard movement down there, even when I knew it was empty. I moved out as soon as I could. And the more I think about that night, the more certain I become of one thing. He did not panic. He turned off the lights on purpose. He waited until I was trapped in the dark. That was not a random break-in. He was in control from the very beginning. And if even one small thing had gone differently, I would not be here telling this story.
Subscribe for more real horror stories. Like the video if you felt this fear too.